objectives. I know there were some questions about SEO and optimization, which happens to be our specialty as a digital marketing company. So I'm going to give you an overview of what to consider when looking at that. Okay, so this is website development and considerations and best practices. Okay, so the first question I usually ask myself, or I ask any client, is why exactly do you need a website? Are you trying to sell something? Do you have a service that you're trying to provide for people and acquire leads? Is it an informational website? So the first thing you need to do is define your goals. Once you've defined your goals on paper, then you can start to really say to yourself, okay, this platform might make sense for me, or that platform might make sense for me. So in now knowing what my goals are, the first thing to consider is what I call KPIs. So these are your key performance indicators. So what you have to do here is you have to measure all the factors on your website that are going to tie into your goals and targets. So for me, as I said, if I am a lead generation website, my goal is to gain customers for my construction business, my pool cleaning business, etc. What would I do, and what are the steps I would take on my website to go about that? Okay, so a lead generation site versus an e-commerce site. And I want to get some of these terms out of the way. Okay, so a lead generation site has form submissions. So these are people, consumers trying to get onto your list to get called and emailed and get into your sales cycle. So how do we measure that? We measure that through clicks and calls. So people clicking on various buttons, contact us now, clicking on a phone number, etc. Those are our KPIs for a lead generation site. The sessions matter. What's the quality traffic that I'm getting to my website, and how long a user is going to remain on the website? And then overall is the cost per lead, the cost per lead. So the cost per lead is really a measurable expense that it costs me to acquire the lead. If I am putting together a paid spend allocation, I'm doing some PPC. What does it cost me to acquire that lead? Is it $5? Is it $10? Is it $110? From there, you'll know if it's going to cost me X to acquire a lead. How many leads do I need to now make to break even or make revenue profit for my website? And it becomes pretty simple math. It becomes a numbers game over time. Now, the same is true with an e-commerce site. An e-commerce site, while it's more complex on the back end and selling and putting products out there to sell and buy, I feel it's simpler from a digital marketing standpoint than a lead generation site. The goals are much more measurable. So for me, this is obviously I'm buying stuff online. I have a business where I sell cleaning supplies online, wholesale cleaning supplies, and it's just a matter of how many products can I sell, and it becomes simple math there as well. So what is my conversion rate is an important measurable goal, a KPI. How many people are visiting the site and converting into a sale? Shopping cart abandonment is something you want to look for. How many people are going to my website, but then they're just not following through to the checkout, they're Xing out. The average order value. So what is the order value for my average user on site? And then the customer lifetime value. I've been a customer at this cleaning company that I'm buying all my products from for 5 years. That's my life cycle before I move on. So knowing some of these things between a lead gen site and e-commerce site, once you've identified who you are as a website, is important. Okay, so platforms. There are a lot of platforms out there. There's free platforms, that happen to have ads and tags on them. There are ones that are more expensive paid ones, and then there are super professional ones. So freemium, as I call them, are essentially free or cheap, cost-effective websites. So a good example here is Shopify, Squarespace, Wix, and Weebly. Now the pros here, these can be great hobby websites. So if I knit on the side, that might be great to have a Wix or a Weebly site. If I'm moonlighting and doing some freelance work, Squarespace might be great for a portfolio. If I am selling homemade hot sauce, right, the freemium Shopify version might be good for me. Now, these are great hobby websites. They're easy to publish quickly. You get off the ground running with, minimal expertise there. A lot of it's drag and drop in the CMS. And then they have great support for a lot of these. So Shopify, for example, has pretty good support. The cons, though, is I don't really see much in the ways of phone support. So if you need to get someone on a phone to fix your site because it's down, it's just not going to happen with these. Most of them are chat and they get back to you within 24 hours. A lot of them have a la carte pricing models. So Shopify is big on this. They'll charge you for every single plugin that you need. So if I need to cross sell, I have two different websites. One sells hot sauce, the other sells jellies and jams. They're both different websites that I have on Shopify. Now, if I need to cross sell there, I have to pay $30 a month for a plugin. And then there's another $30 a month for X plugin. So the costs are buried and hidden, but they are there. There's minimal support for a lot of these plugins. So once you install them and you're paying monthly, it's hard a lot of times to get support if you don't know what you're doing. The customization on these is very limited at best. So if you have a robust brand or you have grandiose ideas about what you want to make your website or your brand look like, you're not going to find them with these a lot of times. So you buy a template, you buy a theme. Shopify, for example, typically a theme runs $160 and you get 3 pages. You get a home page, you get an about page, and then you get what the shopping or product pages look like. But those are baked in already. You can't make or modify or change anything to meet or conform to your brand or your needs. So they lack advanced marketing tools a lot of times. They're there. So Wix has its own proprietary quote unquote SEO tool, but this is not a professional tool by any means. So the marketing on that side is a little limited. They're definitely not scalable for growth. So if I'm selling hot sauce out of my kitchen, but eventually I want to have these mass produced, I'm going to have to start to think about another platform in order to do that once my volume goes up. Brand badges. So brand badges exist on all these because they're free. So you see the powered by Squarespace or Shopify, etc. And it makes you feel a little less professional. And then, as I said, the monthly subscriptions add up quickly. If I have 10 plugins, I'm spending over $100 a month easy on Shopify plugins just to keep my site running. So you say that it's free. That's why I put it in freemium in air quotes, because a lot of times it's not actually free. Okay, professional websites. Now, professional websites essentially could be, they work both ways for a lead generation site. So if I am a contractor or, as I said earlier, a pool cleaner, WordPress might be the way to go. Magento, a completely custom ground up site, or Shopify Pro is one of them too. Shopify does have a model where they offer you a professional website. Now, the pros here are professional products start to finish. So you're limited by your imagination and creativity in terms of branding. Real person support. So us, for example, as Active Web Group, if I'm building you a WordPress site, you're gonna be able to call me anytime to discuss what's going on. If your site goes down, we know it before you do. Custom solutions to match your brand, of course, as I said. Now you get with a lot of these what I call an SEO setup, a one-time SEO setup. I do that for every website that comes out the door with me. So it's ready to be rankable in the search. I'm going to go over that more in depth in a moment. And then the user experience and messaging is all customizable. Again, you can match the standards of your brand by any means. Now, the cons here, there's an initial upfront cost. So there's more overhead, of course, when you go and start the website. So if you build a WordPress site with a custom professional company, it's going to cost you a couple dollars more than it would if you were to do a Shopify site, but that's over time with the Shopify site. So as I said, with the Shopify site that you're paying in the freemium model, that you're paying monthly $100 plus for plugins. Here, it's got more of a one-time fee. So it's just something to consider there when you're thinking about your expenses here. Okay, so things to think about now that I know what kind of website I need an e-commerce site or I need a lead generation site. I know some of the goals I'm looking for. I'm looking for phone calls, clicks, and form submissions, or I'm looking at e-commerce conversion. I'm looking at how many sales and the average lifetime value of a customer. I've decided that I want which platform might work best for me based on my bandwidth and my ability to execute and my ability to scale and grow as a business. Now, the next thing to consider is a domain. Now, when you have a domain, you want to consider a couple exit points. Do I need redirects to domains? Do I have a www.net or something like that, but I want a .com? What I tell a lot of clients is you should own as many of these domains as you can before some of your competition snags it up. So if I could get digitalmarketing.com and then I could get activewebgroup.com, I want both of those domains, right? So you just want to consider what domains are available and the budget that it entails. A lot of times, a lot of these domains are like $12 to $15 a month. You do get into some domains that could cost you thousands. As I said, digitalmarketing.com is probably a $10,000 domain, but a lot of times they're very, very cheap, cost-effective domains, and you just want to own what you can and redirect to your root domain, which for us would be activewebgroup.com. Okay, so hosting. So now I have my website. It's in some stage of development. Again, we've already gone through the pros and cons of what we're doing. I have a domain picked out. Now, something to consider is hosting. Now, a lot of people will go with something like a GoDaddy or a Bluehost for their hosting, but you have to be aware of cheap hosting, or what we call shared hosting. They use one server for a lot of these websites. So if I know over time I'm going to increase my traffic, having good bandwidth and good hosting is important, okay? And with WordPress, if you go to WordPress site, it's important to have managed hosting for that, because there's a lot of updates that happen to that website. So you want to make sure you have 360-degree support with that. And again, that's provided with a lot of professionals, such as us who do hosting. You always get that. So it's just important, you get what you pay for, essentially, in that realm. Okay, so something to consider here when you're purchasing your domain and your hosting is an email address. A lot of times I see a great professional website go out the door, but on a business card, it's just at Gmail, or an old one like an at AOL.com, right? Which doesn't look professional. So you want to make sure you have your root domain as your email address. So for example, here I'm F. Correo, my first initial and my last name, at activewebgroup.com. It's important to have that. One, it's a callback to your website, just in case I need to go to your website. And secondly, it's more memorable and more professional. And typically when you're purchasing domains for domains, you usually get a free email or so. A lot of times those are pushed like an info at, so an info at activewebgroup.com. But for all intents and purposes, if you're one person, like a sole practitioner, you could use, that as your domain. So Tom at activewebgroup.com. Okay, so now that we know about a website, we know what we're getting, we have a domain picked out, we have our email address. The next thing to consider is digital marketing. Now, when we start to build our website, it's important to consider what I call conversion points. So where are people going on site to convert? Now, think about a newspaper. Now, a newspaper is on a rack, right? What's above the fold, the most important headline? Before you scroll on a website, scroll down to get to the more important information. This here is your above the fold information. So having a strong logo presence that's cleanly branded, a great call to action, contact us today with a phone number, having a form submission that is above the fold, very important, clean and concise imagery that matches your brand throughout, great visual elements, and then good, strong copy. I'm going to get into the content more when we talk about SEO, how the two are married, but it's important to have good headlines that are, conversion point actions. And then you want to put some of your key terminology in there. Again, more on that later. Okay, so another thing to consider when you're building your website is you want to have a responsive website. And what I mean by a responsive website is what we're looking at here. So we have a website that looks great on a desktop. It looks great on my 13-inch laptop, as it does on my 27-inch monitor. It looks good on my iPad, and it looks great on my phone. Google, from an SEO standpoint, will penalize you if your website looks great on a desktop, but it looks terrible on the rest of the platforms. So mobile first is a real important thing to consider when building your website. You want to have something that's responsive. Now, site speed. And site speed could be a direct impact of your site not being responsive or optimized for mobile. If you have a slow site speed, think about this. It's two things. So Google is going to penalize you because your site is too slow, right? It takes too long for second and third party elements to load. A good example of this would be I put a pretty video right in the hero above the fold on my website. Looks great. It's good from a brand perspective. We've done it before, to my, cringing about it. But having a video above the fold will definitely slow your website down over time. Then from that, having a website with that slow will cause your bounce rate to drop, to increase. So if I'm going to the website, it's not loading, the first couple of things are not loading, I'm gonna bounce right off the page, and then that's gonna increase your bounce rate over time. It's not really good for your website and your long time viability from a digital marketing standpoint. Okay, so another thing to consider here is AMP. I'm going to gloss over this real quick because it gets a little complex, but Google has its own system for mobile responsive sites that essentially strips out all the garbage information from your website, all the pretty branding, etc. And this helps your site load as fast as possible, but it's essentially a Word document. So it's going to be really good from a digital marketing, from an SEO standpoint, but it might not be so great for you from a brand standpoint. And this is a lot of times what we fight over as digital marketers. So again, Google AMP is a product or service that's out there. It's essentially recreating your website for mobile devices. Now, the best approach here, as I said, is always to ask questions. Am I a B2B or a B2C? And what I mean by that is my business dealing with other businesses? A good example of a business that deals with other businesses is us here at Active Web Group. We service and provide, KPIs and performance for other businesses, right? My approach is to make sure our clients get leads. Or am I a B2C business? Am I a dry cleaner? Am I a contractor? Or even on an e-commerce site, do I sell sunglasses to consumers? So ask yourself the question of who am I as a business? So for us, we want to make sure as a B2B, a business to business, we have a really great, robust website that looks spot on a desktop computer, right? Our emails look really good in certain browsers. That's because a lot of our clientele, a lot of our end users are going to be looking at us from a mobile device 9 to 5, on a desktop 9 to 5. But if I sell sunglasses, I want to make sure I have a really great user experience from a phone, a mobile standpoint. So you just have to know your target audience. Now, ADA compliance, again, similar to the AMP thing and the site speed, is something I'm going to quickly gloss over. But a lot of people are getting sued nowadays because their site is not friendly for accessibility, meaning like hearing, visually impaired people, people with any kind of disability. So things like the contrast ratio on the screen, making sure a screen reader, something that's going to read the copy on the site. So if I have an image with the copy that's embedded in the image, that's not going to be readable. Unless there's some things done to the back end of the website for the reader. So following best practices there is vital. But ADA is something to look for when building your website. And there's different levels of ADA compliance that you can do. Most have to meet level 2, which is the AA. Then there's California, the Privacy Law Act. What this is it's about data. So storing and selling information, you have to have a privacy notification on your website that you're not going to, sell or share data. This is important too. This is another exit point that people are getting sued left and right for. There's actually just lawyers going out there picking a website at random and saying, that one's getting a letter. So you have to be careful, and I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't talk about these couple items when building your website. Okay, now we're getting into the fun stuff, which is digital marketing. So tracking here. Tracking is vital, especially for me. As a digital marketer, data is the most important thing to me. So you're gonna ask me, hey, Frank, what do I do? What kind of image do I put up? Where do I put this? What do I do here? I'm gonna tell you that the data is gonna define that over time. So what I do when we put together a website is we set up tracking and goals on the website. So all buttons, forms, they're all tracked, and I could follow the user's journey on the website. So if I know no one's really reaching the bottom of the page to get to the form, I know I need to put that form further up on the website. A lot of that could be done through what I call A/B testing. So it's testing one thing and then testing another thing, and seeing which one performs better over time. So tracking on your website, getting tracking set up is something I always see that's a tremendous miss, because the data will tell you where to spend money and how to spend it long term. Okay, so a CRM here. A CRM is important. This is a customer relationship management tool. A lot of CRMs, they could be very simple, cheap, effective ones from $10 a month. There's a couple freemium ones out there. So you can spend a lot of money, like a Pardot or a Salesforce. What they do is it bridges the gap between your sales team and your website. So when I have a lead come in, a salesperson will get assigned that lead. And then what do I do with that lead? Do I nurture that lead via email for a while? Am I going to call that lead within 24 hours? Now, leads go cold quickly. So it's important to make sure you're monitoring that, and you're also properly storing that, so you have a system or an SOP set up. That's why I like having a CRM attached to my website when I'm a lead generation website. Okay, now here we go. Here's the most important part of this whole presentation. I know there was a lot of questions on how do I really get visitors and sales. I'm going to go over a couple key factors to keep in mind. A lot of this is going to talk about terminology. So when I meet with a client or somebody who has a website, but they're not making any sales or they're not getting leads on their website, the first thing to do is go over a lot of these terms. When I'm going to speak to you about things, I want to make sure you coherently understand what I'm saying and I'm not speaking a different language. So we're going to go over a lot of this terminology here. I'm going to speak very elementary about it. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to ask. You could ask me after the meeting. You can email me. You could call me anytime. Okay, so what are channels? So there are different on your website, essentially, you have platforms. Almost like if I was traditional marketing, if I was to send out a direct mailer, a mail piece that goes to your house, I put a commercial up on the radio, and then I had a distribution team. You know, I had distro kids handing out flyers. The same thing is true from a digital marketing standpoint. So you have channels. Now, the direct channel is someone directly going to the www.com. So activewebgroup.com, if I visit directly as a user to get to the website, I am counted as a direct user. Now, a lot of times from a digital marketing standpoint, I'm not really counting that viable as a lead that's happened from my digital marketing strategy. Reason being is because they already knew the website. I already knew to go to activewebgroup.com. Someone told me about it. So that probably didn't happen from a digital standpoint. Now you have organic, which is my favorite. Organic is your search engine optimization, your SEO. Users coming in from searching various key terms. I'm searching for Long Island SEO. I'm searching for pool cleaners near me. Those terms, they're going to search that in Google, and they're going to click on the first couple of ones that pop up, whatever's on the first page. They're not going to essentially go to page 5 to find you. So getting ranking great for a lot of the key terms that your user is going to essentially search for you for, or search for a product or service for, is important. I love the search channel the best because essentially those leads over time come to you free. You're not paying to play. You're not putting a paid spend allocation monthly to acquire those leads. What you're doing is you're paying for the service of getting to that. So it takes time. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Obviously, I'm not going to go and rank #1 for soft drinks when someone like Coca-Cola or Pepsi is out there overnight. That is going to take time and work. It's going to take a lot of sweat equity, which isn't something a lot of people don't realize. But these things do happen, and I have been successful doing them for many people. So organic is my favorite for that reason. Now you have paid. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll bridge the gap. So if you're not ranking well for soft drinks right now, I'll pay to play. So I'll put a paid allocation there. I'll put whatever ads I need to put. So whether they're remarketing ads or they're general in-display ads, I'll put ads up on Google, MSN, Bing. I'll have some display ads there so people could see and find and have visibility in the search. But again, you're paying for that. So you have to know what your cost per lead is. It's important. I'm not going to just spend $20 to acquire a lead when my product is only $1.99 on the website. So these things are important to know when going about a paid spend allocation. Then you have your social channel, which is your Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Knowing which social media platform to choose is important. So as a B2B, I might want to be heavier on LinkedIn. If I'm searching more for the millennial crowd, Instagram would probably be one. Whereas I'm searching for maybe the 45, 50 plus, I might be more interested in Facebook. So knowing your platforms there and your target audience is important. Organically, it's important to spread the wealth. So I would be continually posting on all possible platforms that are relevant to me. I'm a big fan of doing one thing 100% and not doing 10 things 5%. So I wouldn't go and then make a TikTok and a Twitter account if I'm never going to use it. I would stick to the core and do good work there. And then, of course, there's ad spends there. Knowing where to allocate money based on my demographic is important, and acquiring leads there. The thing I don't like about advertising on social channels is it's harder to get the end user off of the social channel and onto your website, which is where we want them. So keep that in mind, how you're going to make that life cycle work when you're considering social media as an opportunity. Then you have referral traffic. Referral comes from your outside search. A lot of times that's in backlinks. There's a lot more to that story, but they could come from directories. So yellowpages.com was a referral traffic piece. And then you have your email marketing. Email comes from affiliate marketing, your own internal email efforts, etc. So if I ran a sale, I'm doing 50% off sunglasses to my email subscriber list. Someone clicked and bought sunglasses off that. As long as you have proper tracking in place, that will show up. And that's true for all these channels. You have to make sure your tracking is proper. So you're starting to understand now, if I know where my traffic is coming from, where I'm producing the most traffic, I could then start to paint a picture of where to spend money. And this wasn't true years ago for tangible marketing, as I call it, like a direct mail piece. So if I know I'm acquiring the largest chunk of my users from organic SEO, perhaps maybe I want to put more budget there, okay? And I find a lot of people fall short here in understanding that. So tracking, as I said, is the most important takeaway from this presentation. Okay, so now let's get into some of the platforms now that we know the platforms. So SEO, I think I described that pretty good here, but this is your search engine optimization. It's how your user finds you from target keywords. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot of tricks of the trade here from just a keyword audit. You audit your competitors and you see where there's a keyword gap. That's called keyword gap analysis. But you're looking for continual content. Google, for example, loves when sites continually get refreshed. That's why people have blogs. So you put 2 pieces of content a month, you're optimizing that content, you're submitting it, and it's getting indexed to Google. Over time, you're going to keep doing that, and you're just going to keep chipping away at it, and Google's going to say, oh, this is an important website. This is a more important website for, let's say, soft drinks. And over time, you're going to climb up the search, okay? And then there are other things like having proper backlinks. I just described links to you. Making sure your, here it's HTML, but making sure the backend code structure of your website meets the definition of what Google was looking for a rankable site. And then making sure your design, from a mobile versus desktop standpoint is in place. All these things are important, and consistency is key. Okay, PC or pay-per-click. This one is just paying to play. So sharetribe.com, for example, this is a Google ad. Below it is the organic results for it. So I rank #1. However, I've also put an ad here. So no matter what, I'm always going to show up first or the first couple in Google. Now, the SEO portion of it's a little bit like the stock market. I'm up a couple today, I'm down a couple tomorrow. Being consistent is key. You don't want to drop like 500 places overnight. Then you have a big problem. You get hit with a penalty. But you want to make sure you're ranking in the top couple, and again, that consistency. But an ad spend is really good if I wasn't ranking on page 1 of Google. So I'm kind of bridging that gap while I'm working on my SEO strategy. So as I'm climbing up the search, doesn't matter because I'm already there with my competition and I'm showing up. Okay, social media we talked about. I'm going to gloss over this, but social media is super important. One, it's an extra way to show up in search. Secondly, it's a great way to keep in touch with your consumers from an organic standpoint, and bridging the gap with some ads is always helpful depending on your product or service. Keep that in mind. Email marketing. Email marketing is a very great way to stay in touch with your demographic. Again, if I am acquiring an email list over time on my website, I want to nurture that list. A user might not be ready to buy today. For example, I might not be ready for digital marketing services or a website right now, but maybe in 6 months from now, I am. Now, if you consistently are showing up on top of the heap in an email pool, if I'm checking my emails, Active Web Group is always showing up. When it comes time to make that decision, we're going to be there. And likewise for your product or service, it's important to be consistent in an email approach. And also nurture. I wouldn't always do a sales proposition, so I wouldn't say every single email once a week is sale, 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 sale. You'll want to be able to provide strategic content for a consumer to digest, to go to your website, to use it as a resource. That's why a lot of times you position some blogs that you're using for SEO, you put them in an email marketing strategy as well as you use it in organic social media. So you're taking something you've created, you're leveraging it throughout all platforms, and it's you're doing well doing it. Okay, so that from here outside the email is my presentation. I know there were a lot of questions. I wanted to give a very broad overview of digital marketing as well as what to look for from a website standpoint. There were some questions, and I would like to either go over the questions together if you have some, or I could run down a list and start to answer some of these questions. Does anyone have any direct questions for me? Yes.
Yeah, Frank, we had one person with a question during your presentation
Okay.
asking how to target your website if you're B2B and B2C at the same time.
Okay, so essentially what I would do is, and there's more of a strategy involved here because you're talking about different platforms and different channels. I kind of wish I had the example because the example would help steer me a little clearer. So if you want to have a conversation, please feel free to email or call me because your use case is going to be different depending on what you're doing. A good example would be a law firm. I'm a lawyer who I deal in corporate law, but I do have a branch that deals in divorce law. So how would I would have my one website. I may create a second website or a second domain. The good news with that is you could dominate or own the first page of Google over time. So I have two websites. That's the way to do it. But if I had the one website, I would create landing pages, specific landing pages targeting my services over time. And I would drive traffic to each one. So I'd have a different pay-per-click allocation for my professional service versus my consumer-driven service. And then my SEO strategies and my key terminology would be slightly different. And then I would do some link building to increase what's called a domain authority over time. And I would put myself in directories that are related to both those services. Now, my email marketing would essentially be the same. I'd just be splitting up my list, professional versus consumer. And everything I said from a website standpoint is the same. So see my videos now. So everything from a website best practices is the same. I want to make sure that I have a website that's robust and it is, it is performing great from a mobile standpoint, but it's performing great from a desktop standpoint as well. I hope that answers that one.
Does anybody else have other questions, or should Frank go to your follow-up, your comments from when you registered for the program? I'm not seeing any questions, Frank. So
okay, I'm going to go over some. A lot of people are shy. I'm going to go over some of the quick questions. A lot of them were the same. I think I touched on my messaging here slightly for that. So I got a couple of them about optimization on the website. Knowing the best practices for Google is important. Google being the #1 search engine out there. There's many search engines from MSN, Google, Bing. You have DuckDuckGo. These are all search engines, but Google holds 95% of that traffic, for better or worse. Now, the #2 search engine that a lot of people don't consider is YouTube, which is another Google product, but they have their own algorithm and they have their own best practices as well. A lot of people don't put videos or don't have a channel on there, but if you do, it's definitely something you want to optimize and it's worth mentioning. Now, better optimization for your website. The first thing to keep in mind, as I said, are the things and the points from just a mechanical standpoint. Is my site optimized for mobile? Do I have clean CTAs? Is my site modern, clean from a user experience standpoint? Those things are super important. From there, then I could start to think about both the front end and back end SEO. So my titles, tags, my meta, my descriptions, what's showing up in Google when you search me. A lot of times I see dummy text. I'll see like broken English. Now these things are important. You want to make sure you have proper context in the first bit when you're in Google. And then from there, it's the on-page optimization, which is the writing content, continual content, optimizing images, etc. So as I say, SEO is not a set it and forget it proposition. It's an ongoing thing and it's an uphill battle. Once you kind of get some cadence going and you get some stride, it doesn't get easier, because the competition gets more stiff as you get to the first page of Google. But as long as you're consistent in your approach, you'll get to where you need to be. Consistency with anything in life, not just digital marketing, is important. Okay, so let's see, enhanced functionality. So enhanced functionality, what I think you're talking about is the way your website functions overall. Again, it's important to know what you want from your website, what you want your end user to get out from your website, and what you're looking to acquire. I'm looking to acquire leads. So knowing that, a lot of people want some flashy stuff on their website. As I said, they want to put videos, they want to put content upon scroll, it does all, it spins, it does all this stuff, but that might not be the best way to convert a user. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to keep in mind what the simplest approach to convert somebody into a prospect or a sale is. So enhanced functionality might mean a lot, but if you don't have a clean, modern website, if you haven't updated your website in the past 3 years, it's probably time to update your website, is what I will say there. How to get my website once my business is open. So as I said, there are various ways to go about getting a website together. You could go about it alone, and you could build one of those freemium, cheap websites, you know, based on their structure and strategy. That doesn't mean it's going to do much for you. You know, you could put it on a business card and look professional, but you know, you're a long ways away from ranking and getting viable traffic to your website. So it's two things. One, you have to think about what you want to get out of your website. If you're looking to transition, this is of course what we've seen over the past 5 years. I'm looking to transition from a standpoint where I'm getting a lot of referral leads, word of mouth leads, to now I want to start acquiring leads organically. That leap takes time, and you have to make sure you have a good professional website to do that. If you're somebody who's drawing in a lot of capital and this is your main gig, you only 9 to 5, this is your company, investing some money into a professional website is where you need to go. I wouldn't stay with one of those hobby websites, is what I'm saying. How to get more traffic and translate it into sales. I think I touched on that from all my digital marketing platforms here. You want to have a 360 approach a lot of times to this. So while my end goal is to acquire users organically, because that's the best position I can be in, a lot of times you need to bridge the gap, or you need to be doing multiple things. I'm never going to rank #1 for soft drinks, right? I could bridge that gap with an ad spend and just have a continual ad spend there. But if it costs me too much money to acquire that lead, that's something to consider as well. The same is true for email and all those other platforms. So how do you get your traffic to translate into more sales? One, it's making sure your digital marketing strategy is robust. Now, we talked about a lot of on-page stuff, what I call CRO. So that's your conversion rate optimization. What am I doing on my site to get a user to convert? If I'm having a lot of people visit my website, but they're bouncing off, maybe that video that I have there is taking too long to load, or maybe I have an element that's not loading on site and people are getting frustrated. Maybe it's hard to navigate from a navigation standpoint. I have an e-commerce website where I sell soap, but I can't find the body soap because it's nested in 5 flyout menus. These things are important. And then to know where your user comes from, again, that's your analytics and your tracking. If I know 90% of my audience is coming from a mobile device, my website better look hot on a mobile device. So keeping that stuff in mind and knowing your target audience and where your target audience is coming from is important. Knowing your conversion points and where on-page user is more likely to convert is important as well. How to improve what we have? I'd have to see what you have. If you're asking that question, then you probably need a new website. How to make my website optimized for my target audience as possible. I just bought a domain and set up the basics, but it isn't published yet. I'm still working to get my business registered. Okay, so it looks like you have a couple of things at play here outside of just the website, getting your business structure in place, getting some SOPs, getting things in place from a sales perspective. If you were to all of a sudden get 10,000 leads tomorrow, what are you going to do with those leads? So you need to make sure that's set in place, because as I said, a prospect is going to convert and go cold within 24 to 48 hours easy. A lot of people do what I call window shopping or shopping around nowadays. So it's important to get in touch with somebody as soon as possible. So making sure from a sales front, that's all organized from a logistical business standpoint. That's not a marketing thing. That's just making sure your SOPs and your structure as a business is in place. But from there, your website optimization is the same as what I said earlier. Knowing your exit points, your conversion points, what your CTA and your messaging is important. Definitely should talk. How to optimize my website to get in front of more people. I think, so the way this question is worded, I don't think is proper. I don't think the understanding is there. So to optimize your website could mean two things. One, it can mean from a conversion standpoint, which I just talked about. The second thing is from an SEO standpoint, and I believe I touched on that pretty largely. It's going to be important for me to know your target audience, your business model, etc. What I would do is run a keyword analysis to see what you're ranking for versus what you're not, and what your competition that's eating your lunch is ranking for. From there, I would set a baseline. I would set goals that I want to rank #1 for XYZ, and then a path forward to get there. Now that doesn't happen. It's not like I flip a button and that happens. That takes time. But again, consistency is key. Improve current website.
Right.
Yes.
I do have a question. Maggie wrote, I'm considering building a new website for my small business using WordPress. I previously took the WordPress intensive training with Miller Business Center and am willing to devote additional time to learning it. Can you talk more about hosting options and anything else I might need to do in order to get started?
Sure. So depending on how skilled you are with WordPress and what you're trying to accomplish, your results can vary. WordPress could be simple. It could not be simple. A lot of times I think it ends up being more complex because you have a lot of plugins that have a lot of unique things. If you have a CRM that you're trying to integrate, for example, that could become a quick problem and a quick headache. I definitely give you props for attempting that and taking some classes. That's pretty cool. So you want to consider, as I said, the hosting. You need to manage WordPress hosting. You can't just have basic hosting for that site. And you have to keep in mind updates. So your theme is going to update, your plugins are going to update. You have to make sure you're keeping on top of that stuff, because you could make an update to you could leave your site alone for a year, and then you could update a plugin and it's not compatible with the theme because you didn't update the theme. And then all of a sudden, all hell could break loose and then you're stuck in the mud. So having consistency there, having the proper managed hosting, WordPress hosting, is important to get started. Yeah, I think that should answer that question. But depending on how many pages, what you're trying to do with the WordPress site, there could be some hangups or headaches. So keep that in mind. Okay, so improving my current website. Again, I think that's just you saying my website's not great and I need a new one. Give me a call, we'll work that out. Make my website better. A lot of these are the same. If you feel that your website isn't great, it's not converting, it might be time for a new one. A lot of times, sometimes if you're not ranking for things, I could probably build a better website that's more enticed to rank quicker than it would take me to fix a website that's not performing well. Need to create a new one, activewebgroup.com. Optimizing my site, same thing. We talked about the optimization for on page and off page. Again, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. When I have a lot of clients that come visit me, I need to get to page 1 tomorrow. Well, you don't rank for any terms, so it's going to be a minute. Having those organic leads is definitely what you want to do, but you have to be ready to go to distance with it. Okay, we talked about optimization and getting my site to increase traffic. I think I touched on that. Ways to improve what we have. Now, again, you could have a great WordPress site that's just a little outdated and might need some updates. You could have a very old, sluggish website that I've seen it all. So looking at what you currently have and what it looks like is important. The one thing I will say that speaks to all the SEO elements and everything I'm talking about here, I notice a lot of people are like, my website's not great. How do I fix it? Most of the times I tell everyone you need a new website, and it's not dollars and cents standpoint. A lot of times it becomes the same from a cost standpoint to fix a broken website and create a new website. Most of the time you end up in a better position in creating a better new website. But when you're talking about improving what you have already, you have to keep in mind, if you are going to make a new website, and this is a huge mistake, if you are already ranking for some things, and then you build a new website and you don't take SEO into consideration when doing that, that's going to be a huge fail, because then you have to start from scratch from that. And as I said, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You don't want to go back to the start line when you're already halfway through the race. So keep that in mind when building your website, or if you're going to build a new website. It's definitely vital to have an SEO specialist look at what you're doing. And when a lot of these developers, they don't keep that in mind. When we build websites for clients, we have a whole development front end, WordPress. When we do those things, I essentially hold hands with the developer. I make sure that we're keeping SEO elements intact. My digital marketing team is on top of that. So you want to make sure you're doing it in a professional manner and giving your business the professionalism that it deserves. Okay, well, website construction. Again, we build websites. I went over how to build websites and how it's done. What are the essential things to have on a website to have customers come to the store? Okay, so if you're talking from an e-commerce store, if you're talking you want to get foot traffic into your store, that's a whole separate thing. That's a ranking thing. I'm going to speak from I have an e-commerce website. I sell sunglasses. So if you have an e-commerce website that sells sunglasses, but your users are going to your website, but they're bouncing off, it's definitely looking at the CRO on page is something to consider. Now, a lot of these things that we're talking about, from building a brand new website, my website's not great, what do I do? A lot of times what I'm thinking about are these smaller goal conversion sites, like a lead generation site. I have a plumbing company that has a website with 3 pages. From there, I'd probably suggest building a new website. If I have an e-commerce website that's built on a Magento platform and it has 10,000 SKUs and products, right? What you want to do is you want to consider some CRO at first, rather than putting the money laid out into a brand new build if you don't have it. Doing a couple things on site that might entice a conversion. For example, where are my buttons? Where's my shop now? Is my products all nested into 5 flyout menus that it's really hard for the user to get the polarized sunglasses because it's nested in 4 flyouts. These things are important to consider. And knowing that on a mobile device is vital, especially if you're thinking about an e-commerce website that's consumer driven. The sunglasses is a good example of that. What does a relationship with a web designer look like? How do I measure ROI? Okay, there's a lot of questions. Okay, so what does a relationship with a web designer look like? So I can only give the observation of us at Active Web Group. So we have a kickoff with you once we're all ready to roll. We go over and assess all your goals. Gabby, who's on the call here, she makes the initial contact, and then she goes over all the goals, introduces me or introduces the web development team. A lot of times it's both, because as I said, I hold hands with that team. So I make sure from an SEO digital marketing standpoint, we're in good standing when we go live on the website. But they assess your goals, and then you go over a plan for what your site looks like based on those goals and based on your brand strategy. So, and a lot of times that could take anywhere from 2 months to for a simple website, to it could take a very long time for a complex programming initiative. You know, if I'm building a Magento website with 10,000 SKUs from scratch, it's gonna take you a little time to build. So you know, you'll be continually working with your team. So it's important to have good communication, is what I would say. How do I measure my ROI, my return on investment? So as I said, it's knowing what if you're doing a pay-per-click campaign, it's knowing what your cost per click is, and knowing how much it costs to acquire a user and how much you could afford for that end user. That's true for that platform. But you know, if you're spending $1,000 a month to get SEO services, and you're acquiring 50 leads a month, it costs, an average lead to me is $500. You could do the math there. What's my set show close? What's my closing percentage? I'm going to close 10% of those users, and then it just becomes simple math. You know, are there KPIs I can track, or am I just getting taken for my money? Okay, so this question now seems like you're working with somebody and it's not going well. So I get a lot of these. As a matter of fact, I always get what I call the star-crossed lovers of clients. So a lot of times they'll be working with a agency or one of those freemium or cheap, cost-effective marketing platforms. But again, you get what you pay for. And then I have to start from scratch, and there's a lot of trepidation. My goal is to convert users into sales. I deal with data all day, and you could easily fudge that and hide behind the data. And that's to my industry's discredit. A lot of them do that. Not something I do. You know, I live and die by the data, live and die by the sword. But it seems to me that you're working with somebody who might not be a professional or might not be aligned with your goals. I would consider looking for somebody else who's aligned with your goals and ready to work with you as a partner, strategic partner. It's important. Who do I hire and why? It's the last question. It's probably my favorite. You hire me. No, but you want to hire somebody, again, who's aligned with your goals and strategically aligned with your long-term vision. You want to make a relationship that's going to last years, not minutes. And if you have a churn and burn relationship, you're constantly, it's a revolving door of vendors, etc. You're never really going to, the vendor is never really going to understand your business model, because it takes me a little bit of time to understand the business. A lot of times, some of them are unique. They're genre based. You know, there's terminology, just as terminology that I'm telling you guys, there's terminology that's going to take me time to know. It's going to take me time in writing content. It's going to take me time in rankable terms, etc. So that takes time. And if every couple of months you're flipping them out the door, it's going to be very hard for you to find ROI with that. So building a trusting relationship is important, and building a long-term trusting relationship is important. Okay. I think I answered all these questions. Are there any other questions outside of these?
No, I haven't seen any in the chat, but Now's your chance, everybody. Let us know if you have oh, I'm seeing myself a lot of times. Turn it off.
I'm sharing my screen now.
Okay, great. I
I'm
mean,
gonna put
there was so much here, Frank. I took notes on individual programs we have to have you definitely come back for. But if anybody has any other questions, we have a couple of minutes. If not, we again, this was recorded, so if you need to go over and watch anything, it will be up on our YouTube page in the next couple of days. Frank's left his contact information in the chat, and it was also on his presentation. So you'll be able to contact him with any questions you have afterwards.
Yeah, and if you have any